So let me tell you a story. It's about one of the richest horse races in the entire world, a whole new generation of fans, and some really clever invisible technology that brought them all together. And this isn't just about horse racing, believe me. It's about a privacy puzzle that pretty much every modern event is trying to figure out right now.
You know that feeling, right? You check out a new coffee shop, and then later that day, bam, you're seeing ads for it all over your social media. It can feel a little spooky, let's be honest. But the tech behind it, which is called geofencing, is actually being used in some surprisingly cool ways. And that, right there, brings us to our story.
Okay, so we're heading over to Sydney, Australia, for the Everest Cup at the Royal Randwick Racecourse. Now, this is a massive event, a huge deal. But the folks who run the race, the Australian Turf Club, they had a bit of a puzzle on their hands. See, they were getting these enormous crowds, but they started to realize they didn't really know who these people were. I mean, sure, having 40,000 people show up looks amazing in a press release. But what does that number really tell you? Not much, right? The Turf Club wanted to dig deeper. They needed to get a handle on the people behind those numbers to really understand what was making their event pop. And what they found was a pretty clear split in their audience. You see, the Everest wasn't just pulling in the traditional racing fans, the ones who live and breathe the betting odds. No, it was also attracting this younger, super social crowd who were there for the whole experience, the fashion, the music, the vibe. This was an awesome new audience, but way harder to connect with through the old school channels. And that, right there, was the million-dollar question. How do you turn one amazing day out into a real, lasting connection? How do you convince that new, energetic crowd to come back for other events when the big race is over? You can't just cross your fingers and hope they remember you next year. You've got to build a relationship. And this is where the tech comes into play. To crack this puzzle, the Australian Turf Club teamed up with a company called MapSite, and together they built something they called a digital fence. So the technology is called geofencing, and honestly, the best way to think about it is like a digital velvet rope. Just imagine drawing a totally invisible line around the entire race course on a map. Simple as that. Now, anytime a mobile device crosses that line, the system just makes a little note of it. It's a way of knowing who's inside your venue without scanning a single ticket. So here's the game plan they used on race day, broken down into 3 steps. First, they drew that virtual boundary around the Randwick Racecourse. Second, they used data from mobile apps, the ones people have already given location permissions to see which devices were inside that fence. And third, they collected the anonymous advertising IDs from those devices and basically created a list. Okay, I know what you might be thinking right now. Whoa, hold on. Collecting data from people's phones? That sounds a little creepy. And you are absolutely right to ask that question. This is where the safely part of this whole thing becomes absolutely critical. And this is the most important part of the whole story. No personal information was ever collected. Not a single name, no email addresses, no phone numbers, nothing that could be traced back to an actual person. That was the #1 rule, the foundation of this entire strategy. So what did they collect? Well, instead of personal info, they gathered these anonymized mobile advertising IDs, or MAIDs for short. The best analogy for a MAID is to think of it like a nameless ticket stub. It proves a device was at the racecourse, but it tells you nothing about the person who was holding it. All that personal stuff, completely off limits. So let's just quickly run through that privacy checklist again. The data came from people who had already opted in on their apps. It was totally anonymous, and the whole thing was fully compliant with all the major privacy laws. It was designed from the ground up to be safe and respectful. Okay, so they built the fence, they identified all these anonymous devices, and they did it all by the book. Great, but did it actually work? What was the real payoff for all this clever tech? So what did this digital fence actually end up doing? Well, it gave the Turf Club the perfect tool to solve their original problem. How in the world do you keep talking to that new audience once the party's over? The results were, frankly, a game changer. They now had this qualified audience list, a group of anonymous IDs they knew for a fact had been to the Everest. This meant they could run these super targeted ad campaigns for other race days, focusing on all the fun social stuff they knew this new crowd loved. Instead of just shouting into the void and hoping for the best, they could talk directly to the right people. And it worked. They extended that relationship way beyond a single Saturday and actually grew attendance from the exact generation they were trying to reach. So, in the end, this digital fence wasn't a wall designed to keep people out. It was a bridge. It created this direct and, most importantly, privacy-safe way for the Australian Turf Club to keep the conversation going with a really valuable new audience. It let them use the amazing energy from the Everest to power their events all year long.